Hi, I'm Mary Greendale, and welcome to another edition of Just Thinking. So, are sidewalks a luxury or a necessity? Are they an amenity or essential? If we look at history, we know that walking on sidewalks or wooden boardwalks at the edges of streets was a lot safer than sharing the dirt road with wagons and horses. When cars first appeared, horses were at risk and often hurt or killed by the vehicles. People stood less of a chance, so more and more sidewalks appeared in urban areas. How else could one get from home to work to store? Fast forward to the 20th century, and we were a car-centric nation. Many have warned for years that we needed to change this obsession for the sake of the planet and to preserve the sense of community that our cities and towns enjoy. During urban renewal days of the 50s and 60s, entire neighborhoods were destroyed in cities to allow highway development. Cars passed over and by the stores that were once the backbone of the community. People without cars became isolated from one another and from the services and jobs they needed. Now, in the first quarter of the 21st century, the debate continues to rage. Are we locked into cars, whether they run on electricity, hydrogen, or used cooking oil? Have we trapped ourselves into these little metal boxes to forever sit in lines and avoid eye contact with the driver one lane over? I used to work on Causeway Street in Boston, and we walked right past the Boston Garden under that horrible grid work of the elevated highway. It was dark on sunny days. The darkness made it easier for the homeless to hide and sleep undisturbed. Many store windows had bars on them, indicating a level of risk that made me a little anxious in the dark at the end of a winter day. Today, that highway is gone. The sun shines, people walk to new stores and rehab storefronts. The sidewalks are wider and the street is narrower. It looks and feels safer, healthier. But that's the city, not Holliston. Maybe sidewalks matter in urban areas and not out here. After all, everyone has a car, right? And really, where would people go if there were sidewalks everywhere? There are no stores or jobs on every block. Sure, sidewalks might be fundamental downtown on Central Street or Railroad, but farther out? Why or why not? So that's the topic today, sidewalks. There was an article at the town meeting on October 17th to rehab sidewalks and make them handicapped accessible, and it passed. We should be embarrassed that they have not been, for many years, accessible to those who needed them, despite the law. Originally, there was talk of asking for funds to install sidewalks along Norfolk Street, but that's been put on hold for now. So we're going to talk today about sidewalks in general and a little bit about sidewalks specifically on Norfolk Street. We'll start with what happened at the town meeting. So I have with me Tina Hein, who is a member of the Select Board, Carmen Chiango, a member of the Council on Aging, Vince Murphy, a member of the Finance Committee, and Melissa Kaspern, a Park Commissioner. Now, you need to understand that the elected officials are not representing their boards, but will be participating as individuals who have the perspective they gained from their positions, but they are not speaking in any official capacity for their committees. So, Tina, would you do me a favor and please explain what passed at town meeting and what happened to the Norfolk Street project?
So town meeting approved through the capital article funding for ADA sidewalk and ramp improvements throughout town. We have a long list of deficiencies in our network, and we have a report backing up that list. So we have a third party, an outside group coming in, that was Stantec, who did the report. They came and identified these deficits, and their strong recommendation to the town of Holliston was to address the deficits to improve ADA compliance, to be in compliance with federal law.
Are most of those downtown or any of them in scattered areas?
Their focus was in the downtown area. Their focus was in areas that had public schools, public buildings, that had services, that had parks. So that was their primary focus. Did they go outside of that area? They sure did. But no, you could argue that the majority of those deficits were identified in the downtown area because that's where the majority of our services and public buildings are. So town meeting approved funding for repairs to existing sidewalks and existing ramps in order to, again, meet ADA compliance. We did not move forward on the Norfolk Street proposal. There was a working group with 3 members of the Finance Committee and 1 member of my board, the Select Board, who met several times over the summer months and into early fall to sort of flesh out would there be approval, would we get to a place where we could recommend a project that brought new sidewalks, but in addition to that, drainage issues and water main replacements along Norfolk Street. And at the time, the working group did not come back with a recommendation to either board to move forward with that. I was clear in my statements when that information was shared with my board. I was disappointed by the news, by the decision to not make a recommendation, but I respected the work of the group. And the intention from where I sit is to bring the Norfolk Street project or a similar project back to the working group for consideration for May or future town meetings.
Okay. Carmen, do you find it difficult navigating the sidewalks that we have these days?
Downtown, it's not too difficult because, well, let's take Central Street from Fisk down. The sidewalks there are half decent, all right. But if I was to park in front of Fisk's and try to get out of my car, well, I don't do much driving now anymore, but just to get from the car up onto the sidewalk, it's kind of difficult. Usually I look for a place, or my wife does, where there's a tree I can grab when I get out, or a pole, a sign, something like that. As you go down closer to Blair Square, it's fairly easy to move around down there. But if the banks, it's no problem because there are parking lots. There's small space behind Fisk's. Sometimes we park there if we have to do business there. But a lot of well, even if a bus, let's say I rode the bus from the senior center, which I've started to do periodically, it'd be hard for them to park where there was a ramp to get out and get onto the sidewalk and do business.
I know that you and I talked about just even the sidewalk that's along the side of Town Hall, and it has just a tiny lip that can be a problem. But when you have difficulty walking or you're walking with help, that tiny lip looks like a mountain, So it's something I don't think you get to start to think about until you find it a challenge for yourself. Now, one thing I have thought about for years and years and years is the ice on the sidewalks in the wintertime. And I think this last year we finally started to make progress in that regard. But downtown was impassable because you couldn't walk on the sidewalks due to the salt. So it was kind of like, why did we have them anyway? When I was in my grumpy moods, So I absolutely am an advocate for sidewalks. I should say that because I like walking on sidewalks better than I like walking in the woods. It's just, for whatever. Live in the woods, so getting out of the woods and going downtown and walking on the sidewalks is kind of fun. So in a proposal to put sidewalks down Norfolk Street, Melissa, well, here we go. Norfolk Street leads us right down to some of your park areas. You've got Potoma and you've also got the lake. So how does that affect you and what are your thoughts?
I mean, it affects us greatly in a positive way if we could get sidewalks down there, because that is where Stoddard Park is, Lake Winthrop, Potoma. The lake and Stoddard are the location of our biggest camp, Camp Potoma, Junior Potoma, Senior Potoma. It would be great if we could have some connection, especially for the older Senior Potoma, to, have the ability to go into town for like a field trip. We do field trip days with them. If we could do a walk, walk to Cheryl Cohen Mosaics or something like that, to just kind of make that connection downtown. I think it would also maybe provide some connection if we could walk some of those kids over to Goodwill to see some of the younger campers and or our CITs to have that ability to walk. I just think, having the ability to walk to that place or, it it just opens it up to more opportunities for the campers and also just people that want to attend the camp. You know, drop off those older kids. If the parents are leaving for work early, they could walk. You know, and if you go from downtown all the way to the lake, that's a good chunk of the population if they can get, you know, downtown and to walk to camp. So it might open up even the possibility of being a CIT or being able to attend camp for that older population.
I hadn't thought about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
You know, the little kids are, you know, it'd be nice for the parents to, you know, walk the little kids too, but, or it just seems like once you gain that little bit of independence, that age group, I feel like that's an age group that maybe we don't have as many options for. And just the independence of like, yeah, I'm walking myself to and from camp. That's a big deal, you know, at that age to just kind of feel and to grow and take on that responsibility. So it would be great for us. And even if part of the Potomac parking lot or walking to that area was part of the improvement for Norfolk Street, because we do have tennis courts over there. There's demand for pickleball, but that parking lot's a little hard to navigate because it's the terrain is a little rocky and it needs some improvements, and that's something that's on our list. But if that could be tied in, and then we have more opportunity for people that are screaming to play pickleball, and I agree with them. You know, and that would be a great place to turn those courts. Yeah,
You could add. Oh, that would be great. That would really be great. So, Vince, you live down that way.
I do. I live in Norfolk Street, right between the two parks.
Yeah.
I can started in Potomac. Usually, if I'm walking, I take my pug out for a walk, and we walk. I carefully walk because it is a very busy street. It's one of the few streets where we still have trucks allowed there, so trucks are coming from Medway. It's a connection between Medway and Norfolk, Holliston, downtown Holliston. So we got all the different trucks coming, and it's a busy street. But I have to be careful when I'm wearing usually a fluorescent color shirt, just because I don't want to get hit and figure that. So I am an advocate. I'm also on the finance committee, so I'm a little balanced and.
You have to wear two hats.
I do, yes.
That's okay. That's all right. So people like the rail trail because they call it, you know, because it's walkable. Do sidewalks downtown count as walkability? Does that, you know, is that the same thing? You go to the rail trail, you go for a walk. If you go downtown, are you going for a walk?
I think you're doing walking with maybe two different purposes. And it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Like just because you have the rail trail doesn't mean you don't need sidewalks. I mean, I have, you know, as a real estate agent, I have clients that like to move to certain areas because then they're on the rail trail and they can, you know, get downtown. But that's also different than, you know, being able to just walk to the store or I don't know. And it's a different population too, just, you know, seeing your neighbors, being out, or just even walking your kids somewhere downtown. You know, not everything is directly off the rail trail.
True.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking we'd probably get more middle school kids going to the different parks, because when I was in middle school, I'd be riding my bike from where I lived, which was about 2 miles away from the middle school. I would do it no problem at all the time, because I'd rather have the freedom and ability to go there. So I could envision middle schoolers, more so than high schoolers, walking, because they're already walking from the middle school, walking up and going up to the park, playing basketball or playing, you know, whatever, football by themselves in group. But I think right now they'd be a little hesitant because it is a busy street.
Oh, I wouldn't let my kids walk on it, I'm sure.
And Mary, I think words matter in how you define what we're trying to accomplish through expanded sidewalks and a Norfolk Street project, as well as the repairs of existing. Walkability is, the friendliness of being able to walk in a place, and it's a piece of it. We all want walkable streets for that purpose. It's nice to be out in a place we feel comfortable and we enjoy the view around us. But sidewalks, they're not a luxury. Transportation is not just cars. Transportation is how you get from point A to point B. And so I think we have to be careful about how we choose the word. And I'm recognizing that you asked a question, and this would be my answer to it, that when we consider sidewalks and crosswalks, we are looking at infrastructure for transportation purposes. Whether a person chooses to drive, chooses to take public transit, and public transit is the senior center bus, it is the MWRTA bus that goes through downtown Holliston, it is the school buses. Those are all forms of public transit. Whether or not you choose that or being in your own personal passenger vehicle, those are choices the person makes, but it's all part of an infrastructure for transportation purposes. And so I think we just have to be careful about how we view sidewalks. So is it a luxury? No, it's a critical, essential piece to our transportation system here in Holliston.
Whereas we might say the rail trail is a luxury?
People use the rail trail for transportation purposes, and when you think about what it was before it was a rail trail, it was a servicing, an actual rail trail line that was servicing points that today service Boston and Worcester and so on. So it's always been a transportation corridor. I think more people use it for recreation. But people certainly, I use it to ride to work, and when I go out to work in Milford, I see people coming the opposite direction, heading wherever they're going east. So people do use it for transportation.
You ride your bike to Milford on the rail trail?
I do, but I'm not alone, and I don't do it every day, but anytime I'm up there and anytime we are in our backyard looking up at the rail trail, we see people in the morning going to work with their backpacks on, and we see people coming home at night. So those are adults who may otherwise have a choice to drive a car, choosing to commute by bike, but then you see the children going to school along the rail trail, and that's also a commuting choice.
When did rail service end in Holliston?
Well, the actual
Trains.
the passenger train in the 50s.
57.
50s.
But we actually had a train going through all the way until 1984. And that was the last night of the last train. I remember writing an article about it because it would go to Axton Cross, went from downtown to Axton Cross, or through downtown to Axton Cross, and it always sounded the whistle as it went into the tunnel. And it was just such a wonderful sound. I just loved it, but I always knew when it was 5 o'clock because that's when it would go by. But yeah, that's when it was when it ended for sure. But while I have you, Carmen, so do you live in an area where you can walk on sidewalks? I don't know where you live.
Chamberlain Street.
Okay. Well, you don't have many sidewalks up there, do you, or do you?
No, it's amazing. You turn the corner onto Gerald Street, there are some sidewalks, all right? You go further up Chamberlain Street, which was first developed, there are some sidewalks. When I used to do a lot of walking, I always walked on the street because I always faced the traffic. I don't like things coming up behind me, so I always faced the traffic. And I'd walk up Chamberlain Street all the way to the end, and then loop around on another street and go down Gerald Street, and then back to my house. But there's a lot more traffic there now because people use Chamberlain Street as a cut-through to get to Route 16.
Yeah. No, that's
And
true.
Then they get, go down Gorwin to Marshall and out that way.
You're right that there's a lot more traffic, but I think that's true on absolutely every street. Now, when I lived in Queens, we had sidewalks that was on one side, and they were about that wide, and they'd been overgrown with all kinds of stuff. I'm not sure it qualifies as sidewalks, but what we could do was to walk right in the middle of the street. Nobody was, you could always hear a car coming and get out of the way.
Excuse me, I think Carmen brings up another point about community and neighborhoods and how sidewalks, and our roads too, but on congested roads it's a safety concern, but sidewalks in those spaces become how we connect with our neighbors, how we connect with our community. So I don't view that as a luxury. I view that as an essential thing that most people here in Holliston value very highly, which is we are a family-centered, strong community. We enjoy our neighborhoods and our neighbors, and we like that sense of community. And so sidewalks, again, serve an essential piece in connecting us to one another.
Well, as I say, Queens didn't have sidewalks, but we certainly had walkability. You were able to walk, and we had walking groups. If it was 8 o'clock in the morning, you knew which group was out there, and if it was 2 in the afternoon, you knew which group was out there, and that was just the way it is. I think people are inclined to do that to get out to walk with friends or neighbors or whatever, and it is a good way to maintain some level of community. So what is the downside? It's obviously the financial piece, but all these years, and I'm certainly talking long before any of you represented on any board or organization in this town, it has been a battle, just to get sidewalks maintained, just to get sidewalks shoveled, just to get sidewalks sanded, requiring the merchants to take care of their own. I mean, it's just been a constant, I will say, anti-sidewalk sentiment, okay? Now, we've had to change at the highway department that might help with this too, but there's been that whole philosophy. But if we all agreed, and I don't know if we will by the end of this conversation, if we all agreed that sidewalks are essential, that's starting at a different place than if we all agree, or whatever, some of us think they are a luxury.
So I grew up in a city, and everyone had sidewalks. It didn't matter if you were in a small neighborhood or like on a main street. Everyone had sidewalks. Everyone, you are responsible for your sidewalk. You're responsible for shoveling. If the town does checks and they're like, your sidewalk has cracks, you have to fix that. You have 6 months, period, end of story. So when I moved here, first I moved to an area that didn't have sidewalks, and I was like, oh, I guess I just didn't realize. Like, you just take it for granted. And I was like, okay. And then, when I would see snow or whatever, and I'm like, well, people didn't do their sidewalks, and I realized it was the town's responsibility. It was kind of like this, just a huge mind shift, because I knew nothing else other than, as a homeowner, that's your responsibility. You maintain your sidewalks, not only shoveling and ice, but also if they need to be repaired, you are told, and you have so much, tree roots, things like that. So I don't think we'll shift that far, but I do feel like there is a happy medium, but there's going to be growing pains to it, because it's a shift in mindset, or also, well, this is what we always did, and now this is what it has to be. And I think we have to start with, what manpower do we have? The highway department cannot do it all. The amount of people it would take, if we have sidewalks throughout the, entire town, who is maintaining them, whose responsibility is it, and liability. So, but I do feel like there should be some shift into personal responsibility for certain areas.
I know that I grew up in Springfield, and in that case, we lived in an apartment that was above, so it was mixed use, so it was above a drugstore, and the drugstore owner was the one who went out and took care of, because his business, it was to his advantage, and we never had to worry about it. I never owned a house that was in a city, so I don't know what that would have been like, or whether that would have been required, but.
Well, it's required in Boston, so whoever's the owner of the place is required to so many days, they have to get it cleared off regardless, or you're going to get fined. So my grandfather and we often went down there. We would have to go out there and shovel in front of his house.
Where do you put the snow? In the back of your car?
He had a plot of land, so, but I mean, if we had enough, you're not supposed to shovel in the street, but looking south, and people probably do, and then they have all the different things. But he had enough land, so he'd be putting it in over the hedges that he had. So, but that's a question too. If you're required to get rid of the snow in front of your house, put it in the sidewalks. Luckily, we probably have enough land to put it in there, and it's not like your house is right on top of the sidewalk, most likely, unless you're somewhere. But most of the places here have lots of frontage, so it wouldn't be that bad of a deal to shovel. If that's what we do, that's a good idea. But that's probably one of the big concerns too, is once we start having all these sidewalks, is that going to be responsibility of the highway department, in which case we're going to have to add more personnel to worry about it. One of the things, we do have the new grounds, which
Crew,
is having more staff.
We're keeping them busy.
But I mean, this would be
Sure.
part of the whole thing, is that they're going to be working and doing snow removal. Well, how much can they do too? But the biggest thing right now is everybody's looking for money. During even the DPW discussion at town meeting, they were talking about, we have other priorities. Well, people alluding to this place, the school. So is that going to be redone? And that's a huge amount of money that the town, if it approves it, would have to be paying for. So the foresight is, okay, we have this, we have the DPW, how are we going to be paying for sidewalks, and which sidewalks are we doing? Is there parameters around it and things like that? So,
Do you have to take into account the idea that sidewalks, at least in some areas, have the potential for generating revenue from businesses that are located there? I mean, that's an offset, at least more than the school will ever be. You know?
sure. I mean, where are you talking, like downtown or?
Well, downtown along Woodland Street, any area that's currently village commercial and also poised to now have a sewer system.
That's another issue that we have to deal with, because
Yeah.
that's the cost that we need to talking. So these are the other things we're going to have to, we as the town, yes, we have to make it, if that's going to be a priority, we have to do that. But people only have so much money unless we start doing a Prop 2.5 override, which I don't
No, I don't
sense.
think, I think that's perhaps an extreme way to look at it. I think, isn't there a capital plan that's already
There
taking
is,
some of
and
this
that's
into
part
account?
of the whole thing is, well, is the sidewalk's going to be part of that capital plan. We can plug it in, Travis, who's the town administrator, is very good and has got this wonderful spreadsheet, and give him kudos, is trying to look and say, okay, how much are we going to project? How much will this, if we borrow, how much will this be within the limit, or are we going to have to get an override for this to do the sidewalks? So these are things that we have to talk about, and that's the committees. The finance committee is banding it back with the select board and also the school committee and saying, okay, well, if the school committee has this huge thing coming down, will there be an appetite in the community to actually do an override for this debt? All these things are in, people are
Well,
thinking about.
I'm working on the 300th history. So last week I decided to go down and just read what happened in 1967. And the reason I picked that was because that was the first full year that we were living here, and my son was born that year. And I thought, I wonder if his name in there, So anyway, because back in that day, if you had a baby, they'd put it in the newspaper. If you went to Auntie Jean's, they'd put it in the newspaper. So at any rate, it happened to be the year that they decided to build the high school that we're sitting in. And the high school was going to be $4 million something. And, it was with great stress and so forth and so on. And then come to find out it was $1.7 million higher than that when they really crunched all the numbers, and so they had to go back and add more money. Now, this is all before Prop 2.5, when our tax rate was $85 a thousand. So, but our assessments were very, very different too, okay? But what I got out of that whole conversation was the exact same debate that we have today. And the same debate that we had in the 90s when we talked about, remember when we did the schools over on Woodland Street, and we did and then shortly thereafter the police station, and before we did this, we did a decade of spend, spend, spend. That was not good, from a management standpoint. That was a bad idea. But right now we don't have any of that debt. So we're starting with sort of a clean slate, and perhaps we can put things in and maybe maintain some reasonable level of debt, the same way you do at home. Aren't many of us who live in an unmortgaged house. But the bottom line is, when you're having these conversations, how do you know where to plug in sidewalks as a priority? How much do you know about what the community wants?
We have good information coming in through a variety of different places. We have the Envision Future Holliston survey. We have public forums where we receive tremendous amounts of feedback. We have Safe Routes to School where we survey parents. We have the Traffic Advisory Committee. We have our own emails that we hear from, and we have public comment on our meetings. And I'm just naming a few. We have lots of ways. We have the Complete Streets Project where we sought feedback from the community. So we receive feedback to the Select Board directly, and many boards and committees as a group. All the town, well, not all the town departments, but the Police Department, the Town Administrator's Office, Public Safety, Public Works, and so on. We get feedback from all over, a wide variety of people. And I'm very confident in saying that there's broad support for sidewalks. People see it as, again, an essential, critical piece to how they live, work, commute, play, socialize here in Holliston. I just want to come back to, the cost point that was raised. It's valid, it's a concern, and, for me on the board, I turned to the working group and I put my faith in the dialogue that they're having, that good recommendations are going to come. And I put my faith in my board representation there through John Cronin that people will go in with a good faith to work out the issues and come back with recommendations that are for the benefit of the town. So I feel good about that process, although I was, again, disappointed. Still, good process. But in terms of the costs, I think it is important to point out that there are other costs in not having sidewalks. Sidewalks have an effect on traffic safety in general. When you add this type of infrastructure, you are improving traffic safety for all road users. You are introducing traffic calming, you're raising driver awareness. When you put a sidewalk in place and people are on those sidewalks, you change the way that road functions. And currently in Holliston, I mean, we are a town that has hundreds of crashes a year. And I don't want to be doom and gloom in this moment. It's just that those crashes, when they involve property damage, serious injury, or a fatality, they cost the community a huge amount. The municipality in any city or town pays for that. So a crash that has property damage costs $15,000 per crash. A crash that has, to the municipality, a crash that has a serious injury or fatality is $325,000. In the past 5 years, we've had 827 crashes with property damage. We've had 227 crashes with serious injury, and we've had 4 fatalities in the past 5 years. We pay those costs. As a taxpayer, we're paying those. When you improve the safety for all road users, crash rates go down. We have some evidence of that over the last couple of years. I think the downtown traffic lights, love them, hate them, they have improved. When you look at crash rates, they have improved over the past 3 years that we've had those lights in town. I'm very hopeful that we'll see the same up at Highland, Hollis, and Prentice with the stop signs. That's not sidewalk access, but that is steps taken to improve road safety for all road users. So I think when you talk about costs, what a taxpayer is paying, you have to factor in what we're currently paying for the safety, for the issues related to the condition of our roadways and the safety of our roadways for all road users.
Isn't there also the piece that we're supposed to do sidewalks when we do water things? I mean, there's a coordination. I'm assuming that happens. Because we didn't used to do that. I mean, we used to I think, going back the next year just to see if people would get excited that we were digging it up. That was kind of a game. But I think
now, doing down on Mechanic Street there, when they put in the water mains, they did the sidewalks, and now Yvette Kane said if there's a car parked out in the street, she hasn't got enough room to back out of her driveway.
Well, I hope she calls Town Hall or the Highway Department, because if she has a problem, that's the only way she's going to get it solved. But the fact is, I assume that when we're doing water pipes, we're doing sidewalks at the same time.
Correct, and the Norfolk Street project is a great example of that. So it is in the capital improvement plan. Okay. It is, again, in our plan to bring back to town meeting for approval. And it is in the capital improvement plan today as a $9 million project. And that sounds exorbitant in terms of a project, but it is a project that Ben has pointed out carries an enormous amount of traffic, commercial traffic coming into Holliston, commuter traffic. It's an important road. It serves our parks, but there are hundreds of homes along that as well. So it connects residents to downtown and to each other.
And to reiterate, just to clarify, Tina, it's not $9 million to put sidewalks in. It's to redo the pipes. That's over 1.2 per mile, 1,000 per mile, 2.2 million per mile to redo the pipes right now, and also to clean up the drainage. I guess there's a lot of drainage problems, and I can attest to that because depending on the rain and everything like that, I might have drainage coming through the back of my yard from the side, from the street. So that plus the sidewalks. Sidewalks is only 10%, if that, of the whole entire thing. So when Tina says $9 million, it's not to do sidewalks. It's a lot of other things that we would be doing regardless. The question is, do we also, on top of that, put the sidewalks in? And I personally think we should, at least on Norfolk Street, but the question is, can we afford it? Well, the question is, can we not afford it? Because at least for the streets, I see where we are right now, Norfolk Street starting to get a lot of potholes. So we're going to have to repave it. So if we're going to have to repave it, we might as well do it and start doing the pipes, because it's all at once, as opposed to, oh, we're just going to repave it, but then we have to redo the pipes in a year. It doesn't make any sense.
No, and we get a lot of complaints when we do that. I remember that.
Well, that was the problem, because before they had it integrated between the
Yeah.
DPW, it was just the highway and the water department. That's what
Yeah.
I've heard.
Yes.
And they never talked to each other, and
No.
I could see that being a problem.
I wanted to talk about, or to ask you, Melissa, do you and Carmen, do your two or parts of this government structure get the opportunity to weigh in about sidewalks or any major, but how they affect your departments? Because sidewalks have got to affect the seniors. I'm sure that there are people there who, care about it. And obviously it affects the parks. So how do you get engaged in the conversation?
Well, we've always had a liaison on the select board and, on finance committee that our director, Mark, will talk to. Sometimes when I was chairperson, I would, especially like with the whole DPW, I had quite a few meetings with John Cronin about, how would that affect parks. So I feel like there is a good engagement with town departments of like, hey, this is on the docket, what do you think? We could always be a little bit more, proactive and vocal on things, but I do feel like being in, and even as a parks commissioner, like I'm the CPC rep, so we find out, we have somebody on the Blair Square committee, so I feel like we try and get ourselves out there as much as we can in terms of finding out what's going on, and then just, giving our input. When I knew I was coming on, I did talk to Mark Frank, our director, and say, hey, where are you at? What are you thinking? And he said he's had conversations, and Travis has been really great too, about looking at an issue and saying, who do we need to have weigh in on this? I think he's been a really integral part of like kind of pulling more groups together than maybe we have seen in the past.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. How about you, Carmen? Is the Council on Aging contacted about these things?
We have a good transportation system. The MWRTA, provides, we have 2 buses, and Herb Chambers, we managed, the former town manager managed to get an SUV from them. So, and they take people shopping, for medical appointments, certain days and so forth. And it's really been a big help for a lot of the seniors in town. They 2 days before, they call ahead and say, okay, I have to go for a doctor's appointment, let's say in Milford or Framingham and so forth. And the bus picks them up, takes them there, takes them home.
Does the Council on Aging get feedback? You just did a survey, didn't you,
Yes.
with seniors?
Yes.
Do you know when that survey's supposed to be back to you, the results of that?
It should be coming back probably within the next month or so.
Yeah.
That was through UMass Boston.
A gerontology survey
Right.
from, through some organization.
They asked questions about transportation
They
and so
did, yeah.
forth. The biggest thing there, there've been a lot of improvements in the senior center.
Yep.
And when they made that video about things in town, well, they sort of left the senior center out.
That was me. So bad.
Well, I made a
about that
comment
afterwards.
about that. I said, hey,
Thought about it afterwards.
they mentioned the senior center, but they didn't have a picture of it. All right?
Oh, well,
All right? They said, well, they didn't have enough time.
I was going to say that's because the
Yeah.
folks that
Yeah,
were
they were
doing it
using,
were really kind of
Right.
right in the
A certain
downtown.
area.
Yeah.
But, getting back to the building itself is in pretty good shape. They've done a lot of work there, inside, outside. They put a new, front stairs are new.
Yeah, you have handicap accessibility, you've
Right.
got plenty of
A
parking.
new ramp
Yep.
in the front, there's a ramp out back, the side entrance and so forth. So that part is good. But when they first put the parking lot in, all right, they had sidewalk running from the back of the building, well, the side entrance near the garage, around to the front. But they didn't have any no
ramps?
no ramp there.
Oh,
So
oh dear.
within a week, 2 people fell.
Yeah, so here we go. The senior center is supposed to think that.
Right. Well, so I came out one day, and the head of the DPW was there. I said, this isn't rocket science. I can step down, but some people can't.
Yeah.
And, step up. But they did fix it. So that part was taken care of.
Carmen, I think you raise an excellent point about when you improve access, more people
That's
feel
right, yeah.
comfortable, more people come, more people benefit from the services and programming at the senior center. So accessibility through infrastructure and steps, ramps,
Yeah.
location of
Just-
sidewalks matters.
Just have to be really mindful of it, because, the town hall is not very accessible, and I know that the facilities person is working on that right now.
Climbing the stairs in the front of the buildings like climbing Mount Vesuvius or something. And then the sidewalk, up to where the mailboxes are and so forth.
I know,
That,
that there's no ramp there.
There's no ramp there, but, I have my
gonna fix
wife,
it.
when she's down at St. Mary's, brings, go over and pay the water bill and so
They're
forth.
going to fix this one, Carmen. I have it on good authority that that's going to get taken care of. So, is there anything else that we need to be doing?
I was just gonna, is there state funding for or grant for things like that, like for adding accessibility? I know at the end of the day, it's all our taxes, it's all the same, pot of money, but are there resources?
Yeah, and I think that I know that we have a strategy. My conversations with the town administrator, with conversations with my board, there is a strategy to seek federal, state grant funding as well as state resources funding, so state specific, not grant specific. So we are going to apply for a Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant, which is up to $1.5 million. The federal government has up to, I believe Massachusetts would tap into $5 billion a year worth of federal Safe Streets for All funding. So we have a strategy to seek funding from those programs. And we were awarded through the FY23 budget a bond bill authorization for an earmark for $1 million for sidewalk work. And that we can thank Senator Spilka for her efforts on that. So we do have a multi-pronged approach to seeking all manner of funding sources. I will say that when the town steps forward with town meeting approved funding, it is a great demonstration in those grant programs that the community
Need the
supports
buy-in.
this.
Yeah.
So when we invest in our own infrastructure, we are better able to turn around and ask for support from these grant programs to do the same. It is proven, the time I've been on the board, to be incredibly successful approach.
Well, as a former administrator of $35 million of grants every year, we wouldn't even look at the ones where you couldn't get local buy-in. Okay, that's the bottom line. There's just no point, because there are so many others that do have local buy-in, which means we get to structure our money even farther, and we look good, and we want to look good, So that's the way it goes. But at any rate, is there anything else that we need to do across the community to evaluate the not just the need for, but the desire for these? Is it a luxury? Is it essential?
Mary, I think there are two aspects we don't have time to talk about now, but are relevant in terms of proving the point that walking and biking as a form of transportation is critical, is essential, and the infrastructure that goes along with it. One is equity. Not everybody in Holliston who has a driver's license or could have a driver's license has a car, and not every child has access through an adult in their life to a car. And so in terms of equity, transportation choices matter hugely in any community, and Holliston is proving itself to be a community that is growing in its desire to have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that's very important to make note of. And then the other piece is the environmental impacts. I think our entire world, but we could break it down to our region, to our town, to the residents in it, care very much about climate change and how we're impacting climate change. And transportation costs in Massachusetts and Holliston, they're a third of all greenhouse gas emissions. And so if we were taking an approach that considers or has concern over climate change and sustainable choices that we're making, transportation choices are a huge part of that.
I heard something today on WGBH, okay? Those gas-powered leaf blowers
Oh, yeah, they're awful.
are more polluting than cars. And they had the statistics. So I'm going to go back and get those because if in fact we could reduce greenhouse gases by getting rid of those things, I'd be in favor.
Plus all the noise they make.
That's the big thing. That's the big thing. Folks use them at the strangest times. But at any rate,
There's one thing I'd like to mention. The timing in crossing some of the streets downtown, all right? You know, I walk with a cane now, but sometimes I'm afraid I'm not going to make it across
Yeah.
before the light changes.
yeah, I know there are a couple of I do understand that. Yeah. I think it's all very, very challenging to find the exact mix that's going to take it for everybody, because on the other side, there are times when it's kids, they run across the street in 3 seconds, and all the drivers are sitting here getting irritated because there's no one in the crosswalk, and it's still another 9 seconds before it ends.
Would you believe that technology has a solution for that?
Oh, good, I'm glad.
There are some boxes that you have a choice. You can push the button for a shorter time rather to cross, or you can say I'm a mobility impaired and I'm going to push the bigger button, and that can buy you more time. So there's technology to address that very point, Mary.
Well, that's good to
Look at the things you've had to learn, huh? All right, anybody with any parting thoughts? Actually, one thing, just if you're willing,
Yeah.
are sidewalks needed, essential? Are they essential or are they a luxury?
I think they're essential in certain areas. I think, in some, for example, my neighborhood, it would be a luxury. I live in a smaller neighborhood. You're there if you're,
Dead-end streets.
yeah, things like that. But I think they're essential to the community, the traffic safety, the businesses, just having that sense of like being outside, seeing your neighbor. It's like being back, especially now, people are not in offices. So where is that, we were talking about this earlier, where is that community? If it's not your office community, it's, going outside and on that lunch hour and, just kind of walking the neighborhood or going quick downtown to get a sandwich. But I definitely think they're essential.
Okay,
I agree with everything Melissa said, because it makes perfect sense. It's like you lose your ability to see your neighbors and talk to them, and you get to have community if you're in a cul-de-sac or a development, which you don't have a lot of traffic. I see people.
you do it all the time.
Yeah, because I see people in the back where they live in the development, everybody's out there. I'm not about to go out in the middle of Norfolk Street and be social, because obviously we have busy streets. So, and even walking on the cusp of it, I get a little nervous because you get some distracted driver. Next thing I know, I'm getting hit. So
Yeah, you're a windshield ornament.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, court ornament.
All right, so would you agree they're essential in
Yes, they
many
are.
of their, pretty much what Melissa said, and I don't need to ask you because you are our biggest advocate, and I'm grateful to you for raising this all, seriously. I know that sometimes you take grief for being so passionate about this, but boy.
I think now's a good time then to say that people can trust that there's a decision-making process that factors in the very comments that Melissa was making about some of the choices that we have, where we put sidewalks. And that decision-making process is thorough, it's detailed, it's robust, and it's thoughtful. It's not reckless, and it's not chasing a luxury or a boutique issue. It is focused on some key priorities that I think I hear from the group here all agreeing on. And I hope people have trust in all of their public officials, elected officials who represent them, that these decisions get made thoughtfully and carefully with the taxpayer in mind, and
We're all taxpayers
for
too.
the greater good.
Yep, and the greater good. Those are words that used to be far more prominent in government in general than they are these days. But at any rate, thank you all very, very much for coming and doing this with me. I think it's a terribly important subject. To the public, if you have comments, thoughts, or otherwise, pass them along, or any of these officials would be happy to have a conversation with you. So if you do happen to be around and you see them on the street, please stop them and talk. Anyway, thanks so much. We'll catch you next time.